The Texans have a golden opportunity right in front of them. This is big news for the NFL draft, including multiple reports saying that this wide receiver could be the perfect fit alongside Nico Collins and Christian Kirk. The Texans need a wide receiver very badly. They also need offensive line help. And sorry for talking about the draft so much, but that's the news we got. The draft is a month away. That's what they're doing. They're looking in the draft prospects, and right now, this wide receiver from Ole Miss has a lot of potential to be the Texans' go-to guy for this upcoming season. If you're new to the channel, hit that sub button. Really appreciate all the support, and let me know. Comment down below at least what receiver you want. I heard some rumors about Jalen Royals. I heard some rumors about maybe Emeka Egbuka. He could fall to 25. But today we're talking about wide receiver Trey Harris. And I just did some research on him. He is not the most phototypical number 2 wide receiver in terms of basically where he's lined up. So he's 6'2". 6'2", 6'3", and sorry for the paragraph, but this is the article that basically said that he is going to be a good fit for the Texans. He had a 1,000-yard season. He also missed 6 games at Ole Miss, so that's pretty surprising. But as a number 2, he's more of a sideline guy, right? The comp for the NFL was T. Higgins. So Gary Davenport, a Bleacher Report. You saw Texans Wire. Everyone's saying that Trey Harris is a pretty solid pickup in terms of this year's draft. So I actually been looking into it. I think it's a great idea. Only playing in 8 games, but before that, before he went down, he was one of the best wide receivers in the country. And for a projected day 2 pick, he is probably one of the most surprising receivers that I've seen in terms of what he can do with the ball, right? He's a jump ball guy. His hands are amazing. He definitely doesn't have the best speed. You saw his 40 time. It was a 4.5 40, which is not the best. You saw a couple other guys that were just a little bit better in terms of Tez Johnson. His 40 time kind of knocked him down a couple spots. But any of these receivers right here on day 2, I don't mind the Texans going after because it's somebody who can start right away. And although you don't need a kind of speedy route runner, because that's Christian Kirk, you need somebody who's got strong hands, can go up and get the ball, be a out-of-bounds type of player, slot kind of receiver, slot number 2 in terms of complementing Nico Collins to the best. Because you have Christian Kirk who's going to play in the slot, but Trey Harris ranked number 1 in the nation in receiving yards per game, 128.8 before his groin injury, 10 targets a game, 6th in college football, 8.5 receptions, and a touchdown. I mean, that when you're averaging that as a college receiver, that is insane. So a lot of great stuff to love from Harris. The only concerns were the injuries as well as the speed and the other kind of limited mobility in terms of his route tree. But honestly, you don't need a big route tree when you have 2 great route runners in Nico Collins and Christian Kirk. So I don't mind Trey Harris by any means necessary. Look at all these day 2 receivers. So PFF has Trey Harris ranked 81st overall. That's around end of the 2nd round, early 3rd round. The 66 kind of rounds out the 2nd round. But overall, when you're looking at day 3 wide receiver, if you can get Jalen Royals in the 3rd round, Tez Johnson, Isaiah Bond, Trey Harris, and I'm seeing it more and more in the comments, but it looks like the Texans could just go best available. They don't need to take Emeka Egbuka in the 1st round. They don't need to trade up for this Donovan Jackson, an all-star player. They don't need to do anything crazy, right? 25th overall. If the best player on the board is Kelvin Banks, boom. Take a tackle. Why not? If Emeka Egbuka falls to 25, you have a connection there with CJ Stroud. Why not? But there's still a lot of things you can do in the draft, and the biggest thing is you don't want to reach on players, right? We saw this with Kenyon Green a few years back. You don't want to take a player just because you love them. Because if you take a player if 1st overall, and this might be a bad composition, but if you're playing fantasy football and you take somebody because you think they're going to be great, and then they turn out to be terrible, what are you doing? So this is kind of where you pick your poison as to who you like in what rounds and the best available. This is why you scout. This is why you do visits. This is why you rank everybody in terms of where you draft them. So the Texans might have all these receivers on their list, but Trey Harris might be 1st. Isaiah Bond might be 2nd. Jalen Royals might be 3rd. Tez Johnson might be 4th. We don't know who's going to be available at the certain rounds. But if there's one thing I trust, it's Nick Caserio's ability to make it happen. And honestly, looking at Trey Harris, he's definitely one of the better wide receivers in terms of the middle round players to pick from. He's played at Ole Miss, one of the bigger name schools, Utah State, Iowa State, TCU, Oregon. I mean, all those are good schools, but it's a matter of who's going to stand out. And I think Trey Harris, for the stats that he had last year, 1,000 yards, ranking as one of the best wide receivers before his injury, that translates well to the NFL. And to put that on top of going next to Nico Collins and Christian Kirk, that would be fitting in perfect for the NFL. It's not like he's being drafted by the Patriots and they're saying, okay, you need to play right now because we don't have anybody good. The Texans have 2 viable starters, and you could even consider John Mechie somebody who can be thrown into the mix. And in general, that's what you're looking at when you look at Trey Harris. I mean, he's going to be solid. Again, take your time with him. You don't have to rush him back. You sign Justin Watson. You sign Braxton Berrios. So you have good names. It's just a matter of Trey Harris. This is an interesting pick. So Harris, the only 2 knocks on him is the route tree as well as the speed. So not the best there, but overall highly productive a year ago with Jackson Dart. Averaged over 17 yards per catch. And I mean, although he's not a phototypical number 2, he can definitely fit really well into this Texan system. And now that you're seeing all these articles, I actually really do agree with the fact that this could be a good fit. And now researching, doing more, understanding kind of who he is and in terms of the sideline efforts that he's put up, I really like Trey Harris. And looking at all the wide receivers in the middle rounds, the Texans are definitely going to take a wide receiver, but with how deep wide receiver is, it makes me think the Texans might not take a receiver until the 3rd round. And although that might sound pretty shocking, they'll probably take a Kelvin Banks, a solid, good name, somebody who's NFL ready, whether it's tackle, whether it might even be Tyler Warren dropping or the guy from Michigan. So you have Loveland. You could have a couple options, and it is sneaky. And again, not much going on in the NFL in terms of outside of the NFL draft. If you've seen any articles, let me know. The Texans are definitely being slept on. I mean, I'm honestly going to do a video of who's going to stop the Texans because this team is very underrated. Last year, the Texans were one of the most hyped up teams, and they did not live it up. They had receivers getting injured. You had a bad play caller in Bobby Slowick. C.J. Stroud looked uncomfortable. The Texans had a good run game, a great defense, but now you can build on that this season, getting Christian Kirk, getting offensive line depth. Now, in the draft, you can get a couple more players with depth, wide receiver, O-line, running back, tight end, D-line. I mean, there's so many things you can do, and I love what Nick Caserio is doing this offseason. I think it makes a lot of sense. But overall, you're looking at Trey Harris, who's a very decent, top-notch wide receiver who could very well be higher in terms of the rankings. He's only considered a day 2 pick pretty much because of his injuries last season. He played really well with Jackson Dart, but that's the thing is if he did play the whole season, he might have been a mid to late 1st round pick. So the Texans could be getting a steal, and the injury definitely puts him back a little bit. I understand the ligament, muscle injuries. It's definitely not a good sign, but for getting a player at the right price, whether it's Josh Simmons in the 2nd round, who could have been a 1st round pick if he didn't get injured. And it's like, yes, you say if he didn't get injured, and that's the reason he falls, because they get injured, and injuries are something to be aware of. But for a wide receiver, I feel like if it's not a detrimental ACL type of thing, like what you had with Jonathan Brooks last year, that was pretty significant. What you had with John Mechie and that knee injury, that was also significant. A groin, yes. A hamstring, yes. I'm a little more concerned, but not as concerned as a 1 year kind of post-op type of physical therapy journey. But regardless, Trey Harris is a perfect fit right next to Nico Collins, right next to Christian Kirk. He's a day 2 pick, might even be 3rd round. The Texans have 2 3rd-round picks. They got a decent 2nd. They got a good 1st. They could trade up in the 2nd for a guy like Donovan Jackson, but most likely they will stay where they are. Nick Caserio will make it work. If there's nobody they want in round 1, they will trade back, and it's just a matter of what positions you need. You need offensive tackle. You need wide receiver. You need some tight end depth. I love the tight end situation right now with Dalton Schultz, with Brevin Jordan, with Cade Stover. I don't even mind the running back room in terms of Dameon Pierce. But I would say It's offensive line, it's wide receiver. You could flip-flop those. And then it goes running back for me, D-line, tight end. That's kind of the way I'm looking at it. If you want to go tight end, D-line, because there's not a lot of tight ends in this draft, fine. I'm fine with that. If you want to take a running back in round 5, go for it. You got 2 third-round picks. Use them wisely. Figure it out. Nick Caserio, I trust you. But as far as the mock draft, what receiver are you guys looking at? Trey Harris, looking into him. I think it's a great option. Do you think he'll be a good fit? What are we looking at? I know it's another draft video. Hopefully everyone's loving the Texans videos. If you are, hit that sub button if you're new. Appreciate all the love and support on the videos, and we'll catch you in the next video.